Welcome back, everybody, to the ROS Media channel. My name's Andy. I am the head of this particular platform, the rosmedia.is platform, and I'm back again with my good friend Ian Clifford, who is the founder and president of the Republic of Old Souls. If you don't know who we are, then you are very quickly going to find out, because we've got some very, very interesting news for you coming up this Saturday. We are running our flagship webinar. We do it every Saturday, 10 a.m. UK time. And this coming Saturday, the title of the webinar is How the Birth Certificate Construct Could Enable You to Redirect $50 million plus of something called signature credit taxes. Let me explain. This is a widespread belief that, in certain freedom and sovereign circles, that the birth certificate is some kind of bond that can be cashed in. Maybe you've heard that. Or that it represents a secret trust that belongs to you with a huge cash value. And you can instruct the powers that be that you want to tap into that you want to use it to discharge a debt or pay some, loan off or a mortgage or whatever it may be. Or you just want to take a huge sum of money out of there and use it for your lifestyle. There are, however, some real dangers in somebody attempting to do that, to draw funds from these non-existent accounts, because the system uses something called the law of agency. The birth certificate construct does not belong to you, but you are tied to that by what's called the law of agency. Hear me out on this. Many view this agency trap as a curse, but when it's handled correctly, it's actually a blessing. It's a doorway to complete financial freedom moving forwards. And what we're going to touch on today is just the surface of that subject in a preview of this Saturday's webinar on the 27th at 10 a.m. UK time, where Ian will do a deep dive on how the birth certificate construct can actually enable you to redirect taxes that are owed back to you that the investment banks are paying for the use of your signature credit energy. If you want to learn more about that, then stick around. Okay, Ian, great to have you back with us. Maybe the best place to start with this is right at the beginning. We're taught, aren't we, that our living, breathing selves and the legal name printed on our birth certificate are one and the same thing. So how did the financial system shift the rules back in 1933? Because I know that's a pivotal date, isn't it? We talk about HJR 192 and 1933. How did they do that? What did they do to turn sort of, me, you, regular hardworking people into the real backers of the economy, while just treating us like broke players on a giant monopoly board of commerce, as you call it?
Yeah, the United States went into effectively Chapter 11 bankruptcy, a permanent bankruptcy from June 5th, 1933, which meant that you went from what used to be a money of substance system. Now you're moving into a money of account system. It's all accounting ledgers, and because in every ledger you've got debt on one side, credit on the other side, the credit on the credit side was being provided by the bloodline banking families to bail out the United States, which a corporate government, who had to offer up collateral to basically take the credit from the original bloodline bankers, who wanted to bring in a money of account system, because that way they could enslave the whole of humanity, really, through the system that's been running ever since. And it's working extremely well. And there's not really changed much at all since 1933. So the system shifted substantially in 1933. And one of the elements of the collateral, a big element of the collateral, is human energy. So if you're a creditor and you're one of the banking cartel back in 1933, and you want to have collateral to equal or exceed the value of your loans that you're giving the United States government, who are already deeply in debt, by the way, to the banks already. Yes, that's how it worked. what the government did was they said, okay, well, what we'll do on a worldwide basis, because it's a trust system, is that we will add the value of future labour in as collateral for the bankruptcy. So you've got all the assets of land and property and infrastructure and all the other minerals and commodities and all of these things, but also the labour of the people. And this is where people have made a mistake. They think that the birth certificate has got some huge value. As soon as it was created by the registration event, it's got some massive value, and that value is being used by the government or the state. But actually, they shouldn't be using it because it belongs to the living soul. And that's where the mistake is. So that the birth certificate itself isn't actually a security in the way that people think it is. What it is the creation of a banking entity. And the banking entity is how the human energy is then used on the, I call it the Monopoly Board of Commerce, World Trust. So that's how the human energy is being used as collateral for the creditors, the original creditors, actually being used by the banks as debtors, but as nominees. So they use the energy for their own gain, principally lending it back at interest, which is something which they do all the time. And that's how the human energy is being used. It's creating a collateral, but only when new negotiable instruments are issued by the birth certificate construct through bank payments, mortgages, loans, credit cards, tax payments, any kind of payment. It's when you pay out or when you get a loan or a credit card or a mortgage, does the human energy get used for slavery purposes and collateral for the original bankruptcy.
Right.
And that's what's going on. The actual birth certificate itself isn't what it appears to a lot of people.
Okay. So let's just say that we've got this structure that you've mentioned, and you've spoken about how there is no money of substance anymore. It's not backed by gold, that it's backed by human energy. And then we've got this agency with the birth certificate construct that acts as a banker. So the agency there, from the living to the birth certificate acts as a banker. That's pushing all of this credit into the system as a banking entity. But you mentioned about ex nihilo credit as well, and how, when somebody qualifies for, let's say, a mortgage or a loan, typically people will assume that the bank is just handing them over pre-existing cash reserves, capital that they've got stored up in their vault, or it's part of customer savings. Can you just briefly explain what actually happens on a bank's ledger, the exact second a loan agreement is signed, and why that proves that the actual borrower is the true funding source of the entire transaction? Because I think what this will do is it will help people understand why this law of agency with the banking entity that is the birth certificate is a blessing in reality.
Well, the living soul is where the energy is, and the living soul can't step on to the Monopoly Board system because it's an artificial system. You can't be part of it because you've got substance. So you have this player piece, which is the birth certificate construct, which is a banking entity as confirmed in the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882 and UCC3, which is the Uniform Commercial Code. So what you've got is a banking entity that is going to issue a promise to pay or a negotiable instrument into the system or onto the Monopoly Board. So as soon as you make a promise, which is a bank payment, or you promise to pay a loan back, you promise to pay a credit card or a mortgage back, that promise generates the debt simultaneously. Right. So you sign the loan, which is making the promise, signature to sign the loan springs into existence because what you actually did was you deposited your energy. So the agency between the living soul and the birth certificate construct has to be there. Yeah. You couldn't make that promise if you weren't linked to the birth certificate construct through agency. Because who are you? You can't make promises unless you've got some linkage between the birth certificate construct and the living soul. So that's where the making the promise actually it's like a double-edged sword. You've got on one side of the sword, you've got the debt which you have to service, the interest.
Yeah.
But on the other side of the sword, you've got the fact that you deposited the energy through the banking entity, and that generates a tax recoupment or tax redirection event. So that's where it's a blessing and a curse all wrapped up in the same package. And most people never realize that they can redirect taxes. So the overwhelming majority of the world population just operate as debt slaves, paying interest on credit that they deposited, that the banks used as nominees, lent it back to them, or sent it back as a loan, charged them interest, and they might go through their entire life paying debt back, paying interest on debt, and never redirecting any taxes, which ultimately get abandoned, or the security side of the equation gets abandoned, and they never know, and they die having paid all that interest. Maybe millions, could be millions of interest over their lifespan, or it could be certainly hundreds of thousands of interest. For some, it's millions, and they never realise that all that interest that they're paying is on their own credit, and they've got a tax. They could redirect taxes which are equal to the amount of the credit they put onto the monopoly board.
Are you starting to see this, guys? Are you starting to maybe just have a little bit of a shift in how you're thinking? Is this starting to make a little bit more sense? We live in a modern slavery system, and it's all geared around your energy on this board. And we're all playing it. Everybody's playing it. It's just a case of, are you playing it at the pro level because you've actually got the real rule book to this, or are you playing it at the beginner level with the rule book that the system gives you, and they're pocketing the actual real rules of how to win at this game of Monopoly? So let's talk a little bit about these securitizations then, Ian, because if we're the person or the living being that creates the credit energy and this promise to pay, then what do the banks do with that once we've signed the contract? Where does it go?
Well, the banks are nominees, so they're like fiduciaries for the living soul. But it's very clever because the living soul never turns up as a beneficiary. It says, hey, you've been looking after my energy. Where's my taxes that you've been paying the United States Treasury? Send me some taxes because I'm a creditor. Because the living soul actually can't do that, because they can only get the taxes redirected if they set up a banking entity, another nominee structure, which is the foreign grantors trust, which is essential for the process. So the banks operate in a world of knowing that the majority of the world population have no clue about what's going on. And even if they do have a clue about what's going on, what can they do about it? They can't do anything about it, because anything they try and do is going to get shut down because they're doing it as a debtor. The secret to the game is to play the game as a creditor. Well, how do you do that? You do that by setting up a foreign grantors trust as the nominee for the living soul. But this time, that structure is for your benefit as opposed to for the bank's benefit. And the taxes the banks are paying for using your energy can come back to your foreign grantors trust. And then you can use it, spend it, and recoup it in cycles.
So I'm thinking of this from somebody who's never learned this before. If somebody's thinking this just sounds way too good to be true, where's the proof in this? There's something that you talk about in your technical reports called the Form 945, and you often reference this as the smoking gun, as in the proof that the banks are just nominees. They are just holding on to wealth that belongs to the creators, to us, because they're paying taxes for the use of that credit energy. Where does this Form 945 fit into that? What exactly is it? Why is it this smoking gun that you talk about?
Well, the banks operating as nominees have to pay taxes to the United States Treasury because they are the bankruptcy trustee who are representing the creditors. Well, you know, the banks wouldn't be paying taxes on their own assets. So they're paying taxes because the energy doesn't belong to them. They get to use it. That's all part of the deal. They get to use it, hypothecate it, expand it, make profit from it, but they have to pay tax for the use of it because they are in fact debtors to the bankruptcy themselves. So that's one of the surprising parts about this monopoly game is the banks are debtors themselves, but they get to use the credit energy as nominees for the true creditors, which is the living men and women. So they pay taxes on their 945 tax module under the what's called the original issue discount methodology of calculating the value of that human energy year by year, which generates a tax payment which they voluntarily pay on their 945 tax module. They never pay enough. They always underpay on their 945 tax module because the chances of lots of living souls realizing how to redirect the taxes through a grantor trust, foreign grantor trust structure is very, very slim. It's very low probability of that happening on a mass scale. So the banks don't pay the taxes voluntarily on the 945 ledger anywhere near probably 99% of the taxes they should be paying. They're not paying on that tax ledger. They pay them on other tax ledgers. Okay. And they pay them on other tax ledgers because it looks like they're way more successful than they really are, you see, because if they're paying huge amounts of taxes on other tax modules, that means they must be making huge profits on all their other activities. That makes them look way more successful than they really are.
Right.
Actually, what they should be doing is paying taxes for the use of human energy, which would diminish their appearance of profitability.
Gotcha. So the fact that this 945 even exists is proof that Signature Credit Energy is a real thing. They are using it. They're paying taxes on it. And those taxes belong to me, belong to you, belong to every other creditor. But I know as well that there's going to be people that are maybe a little bit more clued up on this than some, who may have heard of 1099 OID, for example, and maybe they're doing internet searches on that as well. And when they type in about 1099 OIDs and how can I file one, they're potentially going to come up or hit with some pretty horrific conclusions from the internet as to why you shouldn't be doing that. Jail sentences, huge fines from the IRS. That might put people off very dramatically, as it should do. But you talked a moment ago about this 98 series grantor trust. There is clearly a right way and a wrong way of doing this. You have to file as the creditor. You can't file as the debtor. And any information that people are finding on the internet to do with 1099 OID that is scaring them to death is because those instances are people who are filing as the debtor entity, as the birth certificate itself, aren't they? That individual. So just very briefly, let's conclude on this, because I want people to understand that it's not just real, but that there is a legitimate, lawful, safe way to do this that is completely compliant with how the system has actually been designed and set up in the first place. This is not a tax loophole. This is just using the system as it was designed. So what is a 98 series grantor trust? Why is that absolutely necessary to be able to do this in the right way?
Well, it's a standalone, as far as the United States is concerned, as a corporate entity, the foreign grantors trust is like a foreign nation. It stands on its own as an entity on its own. It doesn't have a debtor profile. It is a creditor profile, and it can file 1099 OID and become what's known in when you're looking into securities and you're looking into the taxes that are paid on the use of them, what's known as the holder in due course. So it qualifies as the holder in due course as soon as it's filed the 1099 OID, which is all confirmed in IRS publication 1212, that the foreign grantor's trust is now a creditor, and it is the holder in due course, and it has an entitlement to the negotiable instruments that were issued by the living soul through the banking entity of the birth certificate construct, that then got put on the monopoly board and basically got abandoned because they were never, the taxes were never redirected, so they just stay there as abandoned securities. But the foreign grantor's trust is the doorway into that tax redirection. Without the foreign grantor's trust, you can't do it lawfully. You can file 1099 OID as a debtor, as a birth certificate construct, and you run the risk of, at very, very worst, probably if you just did it once, a fine from the IRS. If you did hundreds of them, thousands of them, you might go to jail. So the worst that can probably happen if you just did it once is a fine and no tax redirection. If you're part of a group doing it, and there's hundreds, thousands of people doing the same thing, then you might, whoever's organising that could actually go to jail, because the debtor entity has no entitlement to tax redirection because they're not a creditor entity, and that is the birth certificate construct. It can issue the securities as a banker, but it can't redirect the taxes back to it because it's a debtor entity. You can only redirect taxes to the creditor entity, which in this structure is the foreign grantor's trust.
Genius how they've set that up, isn't it? It's almost like the birth certificate is a one-way street, but the agency part of that, with the right structure of a 98 series, turns that into a two-way street, and that we as the living can then operate on that side of the highway using the 98 series as that doorway into the commercial system to be able to do that. So there's clearly a right way and a wrong way to do this. What's the scope of this for individuals if they come to the webinar on Saturday, Ian? Because I don't want to dig into this too much, because I want to leave all the meat and potatoes of this for you on Saturday. So what's the scope for somebody that's maybe, in their 40s, 50s, maybe even younger, anyone from sort of age 30 up to 50, let's say? What's the potential for them with this?
Well, let's say you've got 25 years left to play Monopoly. So, your lifespan's got 25 more years. You're going to be playing Monopoly. You're going to be, playing this artificial game of issuing negotiable instruments, making payments, paying off loans, mortgages, credit cards, picking up your pension, whatever it is you're doing, spending your pension. If you've got 25 more years to go and you can redirect up to $2 million a year, that's 50 million that you could be redirecting over the next 25 years. Maybe you've got 40 years to go and now you can redirect 80 million. So it all depends on how many years you've got. And if it's you and your partner, maybe you're doing 4 million a year. Maybe that's 100 million if you've both got 25 years to go. Or it could be 160 million if you had 40 years to go. So the webinar isn't just about a one-off event. It's about a complete lifestyle change. It's about redirecting taxes each year up to 2 million per person per year going forward.
Okay. So again, just thinking how maybe somebody's thinking right now. Maybe we've got somebody that's struggling right now. Maybe we've got somebody who may have been in a great financial situation years ago, but since the economy shifted such a lot, and people have found themselves, really feeling the pinch surrounding just the cost of living. Maybe they're in a situation now where they had a great job, they lost it, they got into a lot of debt, they fell behind. Maybe they lost their home. Now they're in a rented property, and they're struggling. And they may be thinking, well, I'm not worth 2 million. So how on earth can I redirect 2 million worth every single year when I'm on minimum wage or maybe on benefits? I'm only making 20 to 25K a year. Where's the 2 million come from?
Well, that's because they've already probably put 2 million or more on the Monopoly board itself from the age of 18. Add up all your bank payments, add up the face value of your mortgages, if you've had more than one, loans, credit cards, add them all up from the age of 18. You'd probably be surprised about how much that is. And for some people, it's way more than 2 million. For other people, it's hundreds of thousands. But you've got a safe limit of 2 million a year. So once you've amassed that, then you can redirect the taxes on that, and then you can spend it. I'll talk about a private treasury. You spend it out of your private treasury, and then that generates a tax redirection the next year equal to what you have spent. Or if you've got more than 2 million from previous years, you can sort of absorb it going forward. So if you've got 4 million, for example, you could redirect 2 million this year. Next year you could redirect another 2 million. Now you've absorbed your whole 4 million. You can then spend and recoup or redirect the taxes going forward. But your limit is 2 million a year, which, as we've said many times, most people will have a job to spend 2 million a year on just general living expenses.
Yeah. So guys, your next steps, you've got a nice little bit of homework to do here. So I would say your first steps is register for the webinar. Okay, if you're going to register for this Saturday's webinar, you need to go here, roswebinars.is. We always have more people register than we actually have seats for on that webinar. We have a limit of 1,000 seats, and typically we get over registration because of the material that we're talking about here. This is very, very interesting material that you will not find anywhere else. So I would say go there. That's your number one thing to do. Register for the webinar and invite other people to learn about this. Why would anybody not want to do this? This is your ticket to getting off of that slavery hamster wheel and changing your life. Literally being able to do the things that you want to do, pursue the passions that you want to pursue, rather than feeling like you're just bogged down, barely making ends meet, just trying to keep your head above water. That is what this is all about. So register for the webinar. I would say the next thing, and this is a fun task for you to do, we're recording this on Tuesday the 23rd, webinars on Saturday the 27th. You've got between now and then to sit down and do what Ian's just said. Add it all up, going back to the age of 18. Just because you might be on a low income now doesn't mean you haven't over the years put up to 2 million into the system. So do some rough numbers, add it all up, and then have that number in mind when you come to the webinar on Saturday, because whatever that number is, if it's over 2 million, you can do 2 million a year. It's enough, let's be honest. If it's under 2 million, have that number in mind when you come to the webinar, because I want this to be personal to you. When Ian talks about how you can actually do this and breaks it down in much more detail than we have today, I want you to be thinking about that number, because potentially if you take action on this, that number, whatever that number is in your head when you've figured out those sums, is what could be coming back to you in your private treasury. And we'll talk to you about what that is as well within the next 12 months. So think about that. I think that's worth a couple of hours of your time to come to the webinar. It's free to join us. There's no catch. We actually have a prize giveaway as well at the end of the webinar. So look out for that. That is absolutely worth sticking around for. But that is what I would do. So register for the webinar, add your numbers up back to the age of 18. Think about what that number is and bring that with you to the webinar. So when we show you how to do this, that's your number. That's your golden number that you could be recouping within the next 12 months. This could be the best year you've ever had, purely and simply because you've educated yourself and learned what is rightfully owed back to you in tax redirection. So that's my final thoughts, Ian. Any final thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, we should have an avatar available this by this weekend. I thought we were last weekend,
Fantastic.
but you should be able to ask all sorts of questions to it as well. If you are interested in knowing more, come to the ROS Media channel, as Andy said. Come to Ecclesia Law Institute, which is where my research papers are. But you might want to just use the avatar. And we're doing a webinar every Saturday. So, if you want to join in on a regular basis and gradually absorb the information, then that's what we're doing.
Fantastic. Well, guys, we hope to see you on Saturday. This is life-changing information, as far as I'm concerned, for anybody who educates themselves. And I guarantee you, once you start digging into this material, as Ian said, if you want technical, go here, go to Ecclesia Law, look at Ian's technical reports. This is not just theory. This is all broken down, and we show you the exact mechanics of how it's done and how it fits in with the way the commercial system has actually been designed by default. Once you understand this, things start to make a lot more sense as to why you're struggling right now, as to why you're finding it difficult to keep your head above water. So look forward to seeing you on Saturday, and we hope to be able to give you some more education on how you can redirect all those taxes back to you from the age of 18. And it starts with what the birth certificate construct actually is. It's not a secret trust, doesn't have a ton of money in it. It's not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but it is the doorway through agency to allow you to redirect these taxes. So we hope to see you there. Bye for now.